If you have ever been pushed to the very edge of your patience, if you've ever been underestimated, cornered, and left with no choice but to fight back with the one weapon they never expected you to use, the truth, then you're going to want to hear this. Hit that like button and subscribe, because this story is about the day the mask didn't just slip, it was ripped clean off in front of 200 people. The moment the microphone landed in my mother-in-law's hand, a hush fell over the wedding reception. Everyone expected a toast, a gushing, heartfelt tribute from the proud mother of the groom. But I knew what was coming was a reckoning, and it was all my doing. It began as these things so often do, with soup. Not just any soup. It was a potato leek soup, a recipe from my husband Mark's grandmother, a woman I'd never met but whose memory he cherished. I'd spent the entire afternoon working on it, wanting to impress his mother, Patricia, during one of our early mandatory Sunday dinners. I roasted the potatoes to bring out their sweetness. I simmered the leeks until they were meltingly soft. I even used the expensive crème fraîche she always had in her fridge. The kitchen smelled like heaven, a warm, inviting cloud of comfort. When I placed the bowl in front of her, she didn't even look at me. She picked up her spoon, dipped the very tip into the creamy liquid, and brought it to her lips. She held it there for a moment, her expression unreadable. The entire table was silent, watching. Mark, bless him, was trying to project encouraging vibes from across the table. "Well?" asked, my voice a little too bright. Patricia placed the spoon down with a soft, definitive click. "It's fine, Laura," she said, her voice as cool and smooth as river stones. "A little rustic for my palate. And the salt content. Mark, you must be careful. Your blood pressure." She pushed the bowl away slightly, a gesture of polite dismissal that felt like a slap. I felt a hot flush creep up my neck. I looked at Mark, who just gave me a small, apologetic shrug, as if to say, "That's just Mom." And in that moment I understood. This wasn't about the soup. The soup was perfect. This was about me. For 5 years I had been collecting these moments. These tiny, sharp paper cuts to my spirit. They were never overt enough for anyone else to notice, but they were constant. When I announced I was pregnant with our first child, her first grandchild, her only comment was, "I hope you're prepared to lose your figure, dear. It's a great sacrifice for a woman." When I got a promotion at the graphic design firm I worked for, she'd patted my hand and said, "How lovely. A little hobby to keep you busy." My life, my accomplishments, my very being, were always measured against her invisible, impossible yardstick and found wanting. She was a master of the backhanded compliment, the veiled insult wrapped in a ribbon of feigned concern. She never raised her voice. She was always impeccably dressed, her home a sterile museum of beige and cream, where coasters were not a suggestion but a commandment. To the outside world, Patricia was the epitome of grace and class, the matriarch. But in the quiet moments, her eyes held a cold, dismissive arrogance that made my skin crawl. She looked at me not as her son's wife, but as a temporary inconvenience he'd unfortunately saddled himself with. The worst of it was the constant insinuation that I was holding Mark back. Mark was a good man, a kind man, but he was also a man who had been conditioned since birth to seek his mother's approval. He saw her criticisms as quirks, her insults as just the way she is. He lived in a state of willful blindness because confronting the truth, that his mother was a cruel, manipulative narcissist, was a mountain he was not prepared to climb. "He needs a more serious wife," she once said to her sister on the phone, assuming I was out of earshot. I was in the next room, folding laundry, and the words froze me in place. Someone with ambition. Thatcher. Not just paintbrushes and playdates. I remember sinking onto the floor, the scent of fresh linen filling my nostrils as a cold, heavy dread settled in my stomach. It was one thing to feel disliked. It was another to be seen as a liability, an anchor weighing down the man I loved. I never told Mark I heard that. What was the point? It would only lead to a fight, and he would invariably end it by saying, "You must have misheard her, honey. Mom wouldn't say that." So, when Mark's younger brother, David, announced his engagement to his wonderful, sweet-natured fiancée, Chloe, a part of me was terrified. A wedding was Patricia's Super Bowl. It was a grand stage upon which she could perform her favorite role, the flawless, all-knowing puppet master. And perform she did. "Oh, Chloe, darling, you mustn't stress yourself with planning," Patricia had cooed, enveloping the poor girl in a hug that looked more like an act of possession. "I'll handle everything. I know all the best people. It will be my gift to you." Chloe, young and eager to please her future mother-in-law, had gratefully accepted. And just like that, the wedding was no longer David and Chloe's. It was Patricia's masterpiece. The restaurant she chose was stuffy and old-fashioned, not at all the relaxed, fun vibe the couple had wanted. The guest list was suddenly filled with Patricia's friends and business associates, people David and Chloe had never even met. But the first sign that this campaign of perfection had a more sinister, targeted agenda came with a phone call. My best friend Sarah was practically family. She'd known Mark longer than I had. She was an obvious no-brainer guest. "Hey," Sarah said, her voice laced with confusion. "I was just chatting with my cousin who's also invited to David's wedding, and she said the save the dates went out. I haven't gotten one. Did I do something to upset someone?" "No, of course not," I said quickly, a knot tightening in my gut. "It's probably just a mistake with the mail. I'll check with Patricia." When I brought it up, Patricia waved her hand dismissively, not even looking up from the fabric swatches she was examining. "The venue has a very strict capacity, Laura. We had to make some difficult cuts. It's a shame, but we must prioritize family." The way she said the word family made it clear that, in her eyes, my friends didn't qualify. Mark was standing right there, and he just shifted his weight. His silence a deafening concession. The real declaration of war, however, happened 2 weeks before the wedding. Patricia had organized a small family dinner to go over the final details. In the center of her large mahogany dining table was a sprawling, beautifully rendered seating chart. Names were written in elegant calligraphy on tiny cards, arranged in perfect circles. I scanned the chart for my name, expecting to see it next to Mark's at the main family table. I scanned it again, and a third time, and then I saw it. Tucked away at a table near the back by the kitchens was a card that read Mark. And next to it, where my name should have been, was nothing but an empty space. My blood ran cold. I walked closer, my heart pounding in my ears. And that's when I saw the faint indentation, the ghostly outline of letters. My name had been there. And someone had taken an eraser and scrubbed it from existence. As I leaned in, I saw another table, table 9. And there, scribbled in pencil as an afterthought, was the name Laura. I was seated with a collection of distant cousins and Mark's old high school friends he barely spoke to anymore. I was being publicly separated from my husband. I was being exiled. Patricia, seeing the look on my face, bustled over, a mask of theatrical concern on her face. "Oh my goodness," she exclaimed, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Look at that. The calligrapher must have made a mistake. How clumsy of her. Don't you worry, Laura, we'll squeeze you in somewhere." She picked up a pen, and with a flourish, she crossed out a name at another slightly better table and wrote mine in. "There. See. All fixed." But I saw the look in her eye. A flash of triumphant malice, as quick and deadly as a snake's strike. She hadn't fixed a mistake. She had just demonstrated her power. The power to erase me. And as I stood there, humiliated, my hands trembling, I realized this wasn't about carelessness or mistakes. This was a deliberate, calculated campaign to break me. And it was just getting started. The drive home from that dinner was silent. Not a peaceful silence, but a thick, humming one, heavy with unspoken words. Mark kept his eyes on the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I stared out the passenger window, watching the streetlights smear across the glass, feeling a profound and terrifying sense of isolation. He hadn't defended me. Not really. He'd muttered something about it being a simple mistake, but the words were weak, hollow. He was placating me, and in doing so, he was siding with her. "You saw it, didn't you?" I finally whispered, my voice hoarse. You saw that my name was erased. He sighed, a long, weary sound. Laura, Mom said the calligrapher messed up. You know how she gets with these things. She wants everything to be perfect. Let's not turn this into a whole thing. Whole thing. My public humiliation was an inconvenience to him. A thing to be smoothed over. It wasn't a mistake, Mark, I said, my voice gaining a hard edge. It was a message. She put me at a table by the kitchen. She separated us. She is telling me in front of everyone that I don't belong. You're overreacting, he said, and the words hit me harder than a physical blow. You're stressed about the wedding, I get it. But you're looking for insults where there aren't any. My mother is not some evil mastermind. But she was. She absolutely was. I just didn't have the proof that he would accept. His denial was her greatest weapon. It was the wall I kept smashing myself against, leaving me bruised and defeated every time. I went to bed that night feeling utterly alone, the man sleeping next to me a stranger in a familiar form. The injustice of it was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. For the first time I considered not going to the wedding at all. Maybe that's what she wanted. For me to simply disappear. The next blow came a few days later, and it was even more cruel. The dress. It sounds trivial, but after weeks of feeling small and frumpy and invisible, this dress was my armor. I'd found it in a small boutique downtown. It was a deep emerald green, the color of a forest after the rain. It was a simple silk sheath, but it fit me perfectly, making me feel elegant and strong. When I tried it on, I saw a flicker of the woman I used to be before Patricia's constant chipping away had eroded my confidence. I ordered it weeks in advance. I was so excited. I even showed a picture to Chloe, the bride, who had gushed, "Oh my God, Laura, it's stunning. You're going to look amazing." The boutique called to let me know it had arrived and was ready for pickup. That small piece of good news felt like a lifeline. I practically floated out of the house, looking forward to bringing my armor home. I walked into the charming little shop, the bell above the door tinkling merrily. The owner, a kind woman named Clara, was behind the counter. She smiled when she saw me, but her smile faltered as I approached. "Hi Clara, I'm here to pick up my dress." Laura Peterson. Clara's face clouded with confusion and discomfort. "Laura, oh my. I'm so sorry. There's been a bit of a mix-up." "A mix-up?" I asked, my own smile starting to feel stiff. "Yes," she said, avoiding my eyes. "We had a call a few days ago to cancel the order. I assumed it was from you." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "Cancel? Who called?" "I didn't call." Clara wrung her hands. "A woman," she said. She was from the family. Patricia, I think her name was. She said you'd had a change of heart and found something else. She was very authoritative. She said to release the dress, that it was all taken care of. My blood turned to ice water. It was one thing to be slighted on a seating chart. It was another thing entirely to have someone actively, covertly sabotage you. To reach into your life and steal a small piece of joy, just because they could. The sheer audacity, the cold-blooded malice of it, left me breathless. "She had no right," I whispered, the words barely audible. "I am so terribly sorry," Clara said, her face full of genuine sympathy. We already sold it to someone else for an event this weekend." I didn't hear the rest of what she said. I stumbled out of the boutique, the cheerful tinkle of the bell now sounding like a mocking laugh. I got into my car and just sat there, clutching the steering wheel, the world outside my windshield blurring into a meaningless swirl of color and light. This was it. This was my breaking point. She hadn't just crossed a line, she had obliterated it. I drove not home but to a nearby park, and I finally let myself break. The sobs came in great heaving waves, born of years of frustration, humiliation, and silent rage. She was going to win. She was going to grind me down until there was nothing left. I imagined showing up to the wedding in some old drab dress, seeing the smug, triumphant look on her face. I saw Mark, oblivious, telling me I looked nice while his mother exchanged a knowing glance with one of her cronies. The thought of facing that, of enduring one more second of her victory, was unbearable. Couldn't do it. I would call Mark, tell him I was sick, that I couldn't make it. I would let her have her perfect day, free of my unwanted presence. I pulled out my phone to make the call, my hands shaking. As I scrolled through my contacts, my thumb brushed past my photo gallery. An old picture of me and Mark, from before we were married, popped up. We were laughing, happy, carefree. We looked like a team. Where had that woman gone? The one who laughed like that. The one who wouldn't have let anyone treat her this way. Patricia hadn't just been insulting me. She had been slowly, methodically erasing that woman. And as I sat there, stewing in the toxic cocktail of my own misery and rage, a thought sparked in the darkness. A tiny, cold, hard thought, sharp as a shard of glass. She was authoritative, Clara had said. She was very insistent. People like Patricia, people who are used to getting their way, they don't think about covering their tracks. They get arrogant. They get sloppy. A misunderstanding. An overreaction. Well, this was a deliberate act. And deliberate acts, in this day and age, always leave a trail. The tears stopped. My breathing evened out. The despair that had been choking me began to recede, replaced by something else. Something icy and clear. Resolve. I started the car. The engine rumbled to life, a low growl that mirrored the feeling in my chest. But I didn't drive home to my understanding but useless husband. I put the car in drive, pulled out of the park, and I drove straight back to the boutique. I wasn't going to cry to Clara anymore. I was going to ask her a question. A very specific question. I was going to ask her to check her caller ID. Walking back into that boutique was like stepping onto a stage. The cheerful bell announced my arrival again, but this time I felt different. The desperate, wounded woman who had fled in tears just an hour before was gone. In her place was someone calm, focused, and utterly determined. Clara looked up from her desk, her expression a mixture of surprise and pity. "Laura, I really am so." I held up a hand, not unkindly, but to stop the flow of apologies. "Clara, I know this isn't your fault. But the woman who did this to me, she relies on people thinking I'm overreacting or that it's all a misunderstanding. I need to prove that it wasn't. I'm not asking you to get involved, but I have one question. The call you received, the one canceling my dress, was it from a blocked number?" She blinked, taken aback by my directness. "A blocked number? No, I don't think so. We get so many calls. Let me check." She turned to her computer, her fingers clicking on the keyboard. She navigated to the phone system's call log. The seconds stretched into an eternity as she scrolled back through the days. I held my breath, my entire plan hinging on this one moment, on Patricia's arrogance. "Here it is," Clara said, pointing at the screen. "The call came in 3 days ago. In the afternoon." My eyes zeroed in on the number displayed next to the timestamp. My heart gave a powerful thump against my ribs. I knew that number as well as I knew my own. It was Patricia's personal cell phone. Can I take a picture of that?" I asked, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Clara hesitated for a second, then nodded. "Go ahead." I raised my phone, my hand perfectly still, and captured the screen. The number, the date, the time. It was the first brick. The foundation of the fortress I was about to build. I thanked Clara, my voice filled with a gratitude so profound it surprised both of us, and I walked out of the shop. I didn't have my dress, but I had something far more valuable. Proof. That night, I lay in bed, the digital image of the call log glowing on my phone screen in the darkness. Mark was asleep beside me, softly snoring, oblivious to the quiet war I had just declared. I realized a photograph of a phone number wasn't enough. It was circumstantial. She could claim she'd called to ask a question, that the owner misunderstood. I needed more. I needed her own words. An idea began to form, devious and thrilling. Patricia was a gossip. She loved to feel important, to be the keeper of secrets and the dispenser of judgments. And she loved to do it over the phone, where she couldn't be bothered to put on her mask of polite society. The next morning I downloaded a call recording app onto my phone. I felt a slight tremor in my hands as I did it. This was a new territory for me. It felt sneaky, underhanded. But then I remembered the feeling of my name being erased, the hollow pit in my stomach in that boutique. The guilt vanished. This wasn't about being sneaky. This was about survival. I waited until the afternoon, when I knew she'd be in her car, driving back from one of her luncheons. I took a deep breath, hit record, and dialed her number. "Laura, darling," she answered, her voice syrupy sweet. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Hi, Patricia," I began, forcing my own voice to sound light, almost defeated. "I was just calling about the guest list again. I had to finally tell my friend Sarah that she wasn't invited, and she was just so crushed. Feel terrible. I just wanted to understand. Was it really just a venue capacity issue?" I dangled the bait, framing myself as the hurt, confused victim she saw me as. She took it. Hook, line, and sinker. I could almost hear the smug smile in her voice. "Oh, darling, you can't take these things so personally," she purred, the condescension dripping from every word. "Between you and me, it was a matter of aesthetics. David and Chloe deserve the most beautiful memories, the most elegant photographs. And Sarah, well, she's a lovely girl, but she's just not very polished. She would have stuck out, ruined the look of the photos. You must see that." It was a kindness, really, to spare her the embarrassment. I felt a surge of white-hot fury, but I clamped down on it, keeping my voice even. "I see. Photos. Of course. Got you." I ended the call, my heart hammering against my ribs. I immediately saved the recording, labeling it Exhibit A. Her own voice, calmly explaining how she excluded my best friend because she wasn't pretty or stylish enough for Patricia's perfect wedding album. It was disgusting. It was perfect. But I still needed to definitively link her to the dress. The phone number was good, but I wanted something undeniable. I thought back to every conversation I'd ever had with her. She was always talking about her tailor, her manicurist, her personal shopper. She outsourced everything. It was possible, even likely, that she wouldn't have made the call to the boutique herself. She would have had someone else do it. Someone she trusted. Then it hit me. Agnes, her personal seamstress. Patricia trusted Agnes with her $1,000 suits and couture gowns. She was constantly mentioning her. "Agnes can fix anything," she'd boast. Patricia was arrogant, but she was also lazy. Why make an unpleasant call yourself when you could pay someone to do it for you? It was a long shot, but it was the only one I had. I found the number for Agnes's alterations online. My stomach was in knots. This was the riskiest part. This required me to be someone I wasn't. A convincing liar. Called the number. An older woman with a thick Eastern European accent answered. "Agnes's." I pitched my voice a little higher, adopting a brisk, efficient tone. "Hi, Agnes, my name is Jessica. I'm Patricia Peterson's new personal assistant." I lied smoothly. "I'm just getting her end-of-month accounts in order. She asked me to follow up with you to confirm that you'd received her payment for that special errand you ran for her last week, regarding the cancellation at that boutique." I held my breath. There was a pause. "Ah, yes. The dress," Agnes said, her voice full of understanding. "Yes, Mrs. Peterson was very clear. She sent the payment right after. Very generous for such a small task." My heart soared. I was so close. "Wonderful," I said, keeping my tone breezy. "She's an absolute stickler for her records. Would it be too much trouble to forward me the text message thread where she gave you the instructions? I just need to attach it to the invoice for her files. You know how she is about a paper trail." Of course," Agnes said, eager to please a wealthy client. "She wants everything just so. I will send it right now. What is the number?" I gave her my number. A minute later my phone buzzed. And there it was. A screenshot of a text message exchange. "Patricia. Agnes, I have an unusual but very important task for you. I need you to call a boutique named Clara's Closet. Tell them you are calling on behalf of Laura Peterson and that she has changed her mind and needs to cancel her dress order for the wedding. Be firm. Agnes. Yes, Mrs. Peterson. Can do that. Patricia, excellent. Let her show up in whatever rags she has in her closet. I'll add a generous tip to your next invoice for your discretion. I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over. Let her show up in whatever rags she has in her closet. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. This was the smoking gun. This was everything. I spent the next few days in a quiet, focused haze. I compiled my evidence into a single secure folder on my phone. The picture of the call log, the audio recording, the screenshot of the text messages. I made backups. I felt like an intelligence agent preparing for a mission. Mark noticed the change in me. The frantic, tearful woman was gone, replaced by someone unervingly calm. Are you feeling better about the wedding? He asked one evening, his voice cautious. I looked up from my laptop and gave him a small, enigmatic smile. Much better, I said. I've just decided to stop fighting it. He looked relieved, completely misinterpreting my meaning. He thought I meant I had surrendered. He had no idea that I had simply changed my strategy. I wasn't fighting it anymore. I was preparing to end it. The week of the wedding arrived. I had my weapons. I had my resolve. All I needed was the perfect moment. I picked up the ridiculously ornate wedding program that Patricia had designed. I scanned through the schedule of events. The grand entrance, the first dance, the cake cutting, and then I saw it. Printed in elaborate gold script, halfway down the page. A heartfelt toast from the parents of the groom. That was it. That was the moment. The moment when she would be standing in the spotlight, basking in the adoration of her audience, her carefully constructed image at its most radiant. She was planning to give a speech about love and family. And I was going to write her the perfect introduction. The day of the wedding dawned bright and painfully beautiful. The sky was a crisp, cloudless blue. As I got ready, I felt a strange sense of calm, the kind that comes after a storm. I chose a dress from the back of my closet, a simple navy blue sheath. It was elegant, understated, and completely unremarkable. It was the perfect camouflage. When Patricia saw me in it later, she would see a woman who had been defeated, a woman who had, as she'd so viciously texted, shown up in whatever she had. Mark and I drove to the venue, a grand old country club with sprawling lawns and towering oak trees. He was tense, chattering nervously about the traffic, the weather, anything to fill the silence. I, on the other hand, was preternaturally serene. I had my evidence secured on my phone, and a small, powerful Bluetooth speaker, no bigger than a coffee mug, tucked away in my evening bag. As we walked into the grand ballroom, the scene was exactly as Patricia had envisioned. A sea of elegantly dressed guests mingled beneath crystal chandeliers, the air buzzing with polite conversation and the scent of expensive lilies. Patricia stood near the entrance, a queen surveying her court. She was wearing a shimmering champagne-colored gown, looking every bit the gracious, magnificent matriarch. Her eyes found me across the room. She took in my simple dress, my subdued demeanor, and a tiny, almost imperceptible smirk touched the corners of her lips. It was a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. I won, it said. I met her gaze, held it for a beat, and gave her a small, placid smile in return. The smile seemed to unnerve her. It wasn't the reaction she'd expected. She'd wanted tears, anger, a scene. My quiet composure was a variable she hadn't accounted for. The ceremony was lovely. Standing there, watching David and Chloe exchange their heartfelt vows, a wave of guilt washed over me. They were so happy, so innocent in all of this. Was I about to hijack their special day and turn it into a theater for my own vengeance? The thought was sickening. But then my gaze drifted to the front row, to Patricia dabbing a single performative tear from her eye. I watched as she accepted fawning compliments during the recessional, graciously accepting credit for the beautiful day, for the perfect couple, for everything. And the guilt evaporated, replaced by cold, hard clarity. I wasn't ruining their day. I was sanitizing it. I was lancing a boil. I was giving their new life together a chance to thrive, free from the poison that had been slowly seeping into my own marriage for years. I was not just doing this for me. I was doing it for Chloe. The reception began. The mood was festive. Toasts were made, glasses were clinked, and the bride and groom shared a beautiful first dance. I sat at my assigned table, the slightly better but still not the main table one, and I watched. I was a silent observer, a predator waiting for the precise moment to strike. My phone felt heavy in my clutch. Mark tried to make small talk, but my responses were clipped. My focus was absolute. Finally, the moment came. The band finished a set, and the DJ stepped up to the microphone. And now, ladies and gentlemen, would you please give a warm round of applause for the proud mother of the groom, Patricia Peterson, who would like to share a special toast. A wave of applause filled the room. Patricia rose from the head table, beaming, and glided to the center of the dance floor. She took the wireless microphone from the DJ. Her movements practiced and elegant. She tapped it lightly. The sound echoed through the silent room. "My darling David," she began, her voice resonating with carefully rehearsed emotion. "My beautiful new daughter, Chloe. To stand here today and see you both so happy. It is a mother's greatest joy." She spoke about the importance of family, of building a life on a foundation of trust and honesty. She talked about welcoming a new daughter into the family with open arms and an open heart. The hypocrisy was so thick I could taste it. She was building to her crescendo, raising her glass. So let us all raise a glass to the happy couple, to a future built on love and truth. And that's when I stood up. My movement was not sudden or dramatic. I simply rose from my chair. But in the context of the hushed, adoring room, it was a cannon shot. Every eye turned to me. Mark looked at me, his face a mask of pure horror and confusion. Patricia froze, her smile twitching, the microphone held halfway to her lips. "Before the congratulations," I said, my voice not loud, but clear and steady enough to carry across the silent room. "I think the guests, and especially Chloe, deserve to know the truth about how this wedding was really planned." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Patricia's face, which had been flushed with pride, drained of all color. "Laura, sit down," Mark hissed, but I ignored him. I reached into my bag and took out the small speaker. I set it on the table and turned it on. With a flick of my thumb, I connected it to my phone. Patricia opened her mouth to speak, to protest, but it was too late. "Press play." First, her own voice filled the hall, amplified by the speaker. The recording of our phone call. "It was a matter of aesthetics," her voice cooed through the ballroom. She would have stuck out, ruined the look of the photos. "It was a kindness, really." I saw my friend Sarah's face at a nearby table, her eyes wide with shocked validation. Other guests were turning to look at each other, their brows furrowed in confusion and disgust. Before the shock could settle, I spoke again, my voice cutting through the stunned silence. "And when my dress, the one I had specially ordered for this occasion, mysteriously disappeared from the boutique, I was told it was a mix-up." I held up my phone, the screen glowing. "But this is the text message Patricia sent to her seamstress, Agnes, instructing her to call the boutique and cancel my order." I read the words aloud, my voice ringing with the clarity of undeniable fact. "Agnes, I have an unusual but very important task for you. Tell them she has changed her mind and needs to cancel her dress order. Be firm." I paused, letting the words sink in, then delivered the final, devastating line. "Let her show up in whatever rags she has in her closet." Dead silence. You could have heard a pin drop on the plush carpet. The air crackled with tension. Every single person in that room was staring at Patricia, whose face had crumpled into a grotesque mask of disbelief and panic. The perfectly poised matriarch was gone, replaced by a cornered, exposed liar. Chloe, the beautiful bride, was staring at her new mother-in-law, her expression one of dawning horror. David stood beside her, his face like stone, looking from his mother to me and back again, the pieces clicking into place in his mind. This is absurd. Patricia shrieked into the microphone, her voice shrill and ugly. She's twisting my words. She's making it all up. She has always been jealous of my relationship with my sons. But the defense was feeble. Her panic was too real. Her own words had condemned her. No one believed her. The spell was broken. In 30 seconds, her entire carefully crafted world of perfection and control had been utterly annihilated. The grand celebration didn't so much end as it transformed. The joyous pretense shattered, replaced by a raw, uncomfortable honesty. Patricia, flanked by her stunned husband, made a hasty, humiliating exit, trailed by the whispers of 200 guests. The groom, David, walked through the stunned crowd, his path leading directly to me. He ignored his fleeing mother completely. He stopped in front of me, his eyes filled not with anger at the disruption, but with a profound, weary gratitude. "Thank you," he said, his voice low and sincere. "You just saved our day from a lifetime of lies. You saved us." I looked at him and at Chloe, who had followed, her eyes filled with tears but also with relief. And then I looked at my husband, Mark, who was staring at the empty space where his mother had been, a look of terrible, painful clarity on his face. He finally saw her. He finally understood. I just smiled, a real smile, for the first time in what felt like years. A single tear, not of sadness, but of pure, unadulterated release, traced a path down my cheek. "The truth always comes out," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "The key is just choosing the right moment." The rest of the wedding was a strange, surreal affair. The cloud of Patricia's oppressive presence had lifted, and in its place, a fragile, more genuine joy began to bloom. People came up to me all night. Not with pity, as they once had, but with a quiet, knowing respect in their eyes. They were whispers of, "I never trusted her," and, "Good for you." I hadn't just exposed a bully. I had validated the gut feelings of everyone she had ever dismissed or belittled. The biggest change was in Mark. On the drive home he finally spoke, his voice thick with shame. "I'm sorry," he said. "I am so sorry, Laura. I was blind. I didn't want to see it. It was easier to believe you were overreacting than to believe my own mother was that cruel. Can you ever forgive me?" Our marriage wasn't magically fixed in that moment, but for the first time it had a chance. We had a foundation to rebuild on, the truth. In the weeks and months that followed, the fallout was absolute. Patricia was excommunicated. Not through a grand family decree, but through a quiet, collective turning of backs. David and Chloe set firm boundaries, building their new life on their own terms. Mark, finding his own spine at last, stood with them. He learned to be a husband first and a son second. And me. I felt like I could breathe again. The constant weight of anxiety, of trying to be good enough, was gone. I wasn't just Laura, the accommodating daughter-in-law anymore. I was Laura, the woman who brought a queen to her knees with nothing but a Bluetooth speaker and the truth. It was never really about the revenge. It was about reclamation. Reclaiming my dignity, my sanity, and my voice. Patricia tried to erase me, to make me disappear from my own family portrait. But in the end, by shining a light on her darkness, I became more visible, more solid, and more myself than I had ever been. She handed me a pen and told me to write myself out of the story. Instead, I wrote a whole new ending. Justice isn't always loud, and sometimes the most devastating weapon is the truth, served cold. What would you have done in my shoes? Could you have waited for that perfect moment? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe in the power of the truth finally getting its day in the spotlight, don't forget to subscribe for more stories.